those questions because in some cases I'm not going to have the answers for all of them. I hope that I have all the answers for you today. So the Power Platform is basically a combination of these applications: Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. And with the Power, of course, I'm not going to read, you can actually read that. With the Power BI, I always say that most of us are actually visual people, meaning that we better understand the status of a project if it is displayed in a chart or in a different way than just showing that information in a PowerPoint presentation or in an Excel file. So that is why Power BI is powerful, because it is actually displaying the information the way the business needs it, along with the many sources that we can access, because it is all about connections, right? And I will explain that through every one of these applications. So for Power BI, you have to understand that when you build the solution, first you have you can access the application from the browser, and you can download the application as well, which I did it on my computer, and it is free. Build the applications as well, and then you can save and publish the applications to, if it is SharePoint or any other target, you can do that. But with the Power BI, you understand that when you build the solution, you have to make sure that the people that are going to access the solution have access to the solution and to everything associated with. What I mean is, let's say Power BI that you're building a dashboard is connected to a database table or a SharePoint list or an Excel file. Of course, they need to have, the users need to have access to the connection, but also to the Power BI. It would be nice if you can unmute. You can actually, you need to make sure that you give people access to the Power BI solution as well. What I mean is, when you build the solution, and I will show you that in a minute, let's say the solution is connected to an Excel file, and you make sure that, and you know that all the files that need to access that solution, all the users have access to the Excel file. It's not enough. They need to have access to the Power BI solution as well. The same with the Power Apps. When you build the Power App solution, you're going to actually create a connection. That connection will need to use an account, and that account will have access to where you're going to be connected to. And when you build that, the users will need to have as well access to the Power Apps. And then you can actually share the access the way that they can execute the application, or they can be co-owners with you. With the Power Automate, they don't need to have access to the solution that you're building. They need to have access to where this solution is associated to. Meaning that if the Power Automate, and I will show you that, I will create one live and one Power Apps as well, and one Power BI too. When you create a Power Automate, you use an account, and I will tell you something about this. And then users don't need to have access to the Power Automate itself. They only need to have access to where this Power Automate is associated to, either if it is the Excel file, or at least in SharePoint, or a document library in SharePoint as well. Virtual agents is, if you have seen those applications when we're chatting with customer service, for example, and then you ask a question and you get an answer, and then you ask another question and you get the answer, and so on. That is actually an automated process that can be created through what is called a bot solution. Any questions you have during the process? Okay, so Power BI. Before I do that, let me actually go back to my my browser here, and also show you my Power App, my Power BI application that you can download because it's free, right? So it is easy enough to create a Power BI. You just basically find what you want to connect to. In this case, let's say that I use this Excel file. Let me show you that. I'm navigating to this temp folder that I created here with this file here. It can be in SharePoint. I found out a while ago that even when you say Excel file, and it is actually asking you to like browse through your Windows folders, you can paste here a SharePoint location as well if you want to and access the file that way. So I click open. Now when it is opening the file, right, then you're gonna have a chance, if you have access to see the content. I click on then the one that I want to see. It is displaying the data. You see it here, and then you transform the data because that's what you want to do. When you do that, that is actually coming on my other monitor. I'm gonna bring it over as soon as it is, which is right here. Right? Then you close and apply these changes here. And when you do that, now it's coming here. It's loading the information. Now the information is going to be loaded and I can start selecting the data that I want to add. But before I do that, you see that I have it here. Then I select which visualization or chart is the one that I want to use, right? Let me do that. Okay. And then in this case, having this, you see that I have all the columns that are actually coming from the Excel file. Yes, I select this. You see what it says here, more options. Let's get out of this. Let me go ahead and select this. Now it's going to display. So this way you see how easy to actually create a Power BI using the Excel Power BI. And then when it is ready, you can actually the same way access a database, access a SharePoint list, access anything where you actually know the data is and pull the data. Now, creating a connection and pulling the information and adding something like this is easy. Anybody can do that. Well, there are more complicated solutions that you can create because you can combine Powerapps, Power Automate, and Power BI in a single solution, right? And that's one of the beautiful things that we can do with the platform. So in this case, just to show you this, you save this, and then when you save it, you have the opportunity, let me go ahead and do this, to publish this. And in this case, I can publish it to SharePoint and so on. I wanted to show you this. Let me go back to the presentation now. Now, the Power BI has different versions, or depending on the many users that are going to be using the application, right? So the one that is actually included in any of the Office 365 plans is free, but of course it doesn't have all the features. One of the features that I can tell you about that I do not have because I have Power BI is, as you see, is, well, I was just showing you the desktop version doesn't mean that I have access to publish content and things like that. Is just to give you an example, if I want to schedule the refresh in Power BI, because when you create a solution, the data in Power BI is not refreshed automatically. By default, I believe is every 24 hours or something like that. So you have to go to the admin portal and schedule that, where you say, I believe the minimum that you can do is 30 minutes. So based on how frequent you want that data to be updated, then you configure the refresh, if I can say that way. So that's one of the features that is not going to be available with the free version that I have through any of the Office 365 plans. The one that I have now is 4. So there's so many visualization software options that we have with Power BI. I just show you one. Then if you want to start paying, you pay the $10, $9.99 a month, which is included with the E5 version here. So if you have the E5, let me go back. Then the Power BI is included. Let me do this. Okay. Or $20 a month, or if it is actually a large organizations, then they can be thinking about paying $5,000 a month, depending on how many users they have. Now, most of the users in a company don't need to create solutions. most of the users, they only need to view it, and you don't need to pay for that user, is what I understand. Now, there are many ways to actually pay for Power BI in this case for a company, and it is through the enterprise agreements. As you see here on the right side, we have the enterprise agreement subscriptions. Based on which enterprise agreement the company has, is how they are going to manage the license for Power BI. Now, why Power BI? There are so many visualizations that we can have. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull out something here for you. Give me just. Okay, so you can see that if you want, there are many things of why Power BI is the application that you want to use, right? One of them is sensitivity labels. Basically, what it is you can create labels the same way that we actually do it in Azure to identify the information in a way where you can actually either apply encryption, so like in this case, or like I have actually the right definition for that. So is okay, I just remember this. So in this case, for the labeling, is the same as what we do in Azure, which it is actually categorize or label the resources in this case. You can apply these to data sets, you can apply it to dashboards or data flows in Power BI if you do it this way. If I go here to the tags, is actually a similar way, right? By using the service tags with Power BI, you can enable SQL instance to allow incoming connections to Power BI where you say only these IP addresses are going to be allowed to access this solution. So you understand how critical the security and the encryption, including all of the many encryptions that Microsoft manages, is for all the solutions that they have. Now, there are different products for Power BI. The free one, right, which is included in the Office 365 plans that I mentioned to you. The Power BI Pro, which is $9.99 a month. The Power BI Premium, which is more for organizations, as you see. And the mobile version that you can install on your cell phone or tablet. And the embedded one. The embedded one is the functionality that you can access from applications. So let's say that you're using Word or Excel or any other applications where you can add this functionality. You don't need to launch Power BI in order to actually run or create a chart or create a dashboard from the data that is stored in this application. And then you use what is called the embedded one. Companies that are using the on-premise version, they can actually have a Power BI report server, like they have many other servers, for example, to manage the project server, right? The Microsoft project is the same with the Power BI. Of course, if you're using the cloud version of it, you don't need this server, but you know that you can actually have a hybrid environment in a case where if you don't wanna, knowing that you don't need this when using the cloud version of it, you can still build the server and have access the data that way or manage the data that way if it is needed. Now, for Powerapps, any questions about Power BI? For Powerapps, I'll show you here. Let me actually go back to my environment, right? For Powerapps, you have, and let me also do this, only one way to access the application, if I can say that, which it is from the portal, right? So you go to the, let me go here, the Powerapps portal, which is make.powerapps.com. and then create a solution that way. During the presentation, then you will see these options. You can create a Canvas app, you can create a model-driven app from blank, or you can create a portal, right? And then basically what we're doing here is using connections. Start from data, you can connect to an Excel file, you can connect to an SQL database or more, as well as you can actually then create a connection to a SharePoint list if it is the case. So if that is the case, I'm going to show you an example of how easy it is. So I'm going to come here and create this connection. Of course, you will need access to it. Remember that I mentioned to you that the users will not need to have access to this solution that you are creating here. So I'm going to go to one of the test sites that I have, and it's asking me to select the list. I click on it and click connect. And then when I get to it, is when I can start building my app, right? You see that I immediately build the app automatically, and I'm gonna clarify something that I just said a few minutes ago. And then when it's built, it actually creates 3 forms, which they are here, depending on which one is the one you want to modify. For the user's interface, this is the one that you always want to work on, right? In this case, if I want to execute the solution, then I do that. Why is not showing me any information here? Because I just need to change the settings of the form the way that instead of saying edit, it has to say new, and then that will actually give me the opportunity to create a new record here. But for Powerapps, you can also use the application. So let me go back and let me take that back. We cannot use for Power Automate, we can use the application, but not for Powerapps. Now, for this solution that I'm creating here, users will need to have access to this solution. So where do I go to give users access to it? Then from the portal, right? This is, I'm gonna go, this is the flow, this is my Powerapps. I'm gonna go and navigate to the solution. Let's say that I have access to this one here. I open this one, and then you will see the option. When I do this, it's gonna open the solution, right? Let me go back, and then you see the option share. And here where I was telling you that I can actually give co-owner access, or I can just give the people access to execute the solution. Now, one thing that I have seen in many cases, let me go back to the presentations with the Powerapps, is that, let me go back to the presentation here, is that when you create a form in this case, right, they never call that as SAG, an app. And that app is connected to anything in specific. It's understandable that any changes you make to that to the data is not going to any change you make to the level where you say you're adding a new field or a new column to the list. Those changes are not going to automatically be updated in the form. You need to modify the form and add the new fields and so on. Now, if the values of the columns, to use this as an example from the SharePoint list, are updated, then you don't need to do anything. Those values will be automatically visible in the app, if I can say that. Now, some organizations are giving people access to build solutions, all the users. Of course, if they have access to do that, most of them. Why? Because it helps the organizations to automate some of the processes, and it helps also the organizations to improve the way they're managing those processes as well. Sometimes for Powerapps it's okay, but for Power Automate it's kind of risky, because if somebody creates a workflow or a flow in this case that is actually creating a loop, it can actually bring down the environment. So that's always what I suggest, that before you give access, you make sure that the people are trained and they are aware of the things that they can and they cannot do. And I always emphasize that it's not enough to actually learn and know how to do it. It is better to actually follow best practices on any application that you're using. If it is, in this case, Power BI or Powerapps or Power Automate, then knowing how to do things is not enough. by applying best practices when you do it is what you need to learn, which means that when you're doing it, you want to make sure that you're doing it the way that you're not going to put in danger the environment because you're configuring that option a way that is not supposed to, and so on. The same way when you're doing anything, migrations or anything like that, where you need to understand the limitations before you do it, because even if you know how to do it, when you do it, then you're going to see that you have problems accessing the data because, for example, you exceeded the limit and things like that. Now, these applications, Microsoft always advertises that there's no code needed. That is true. You can do a lot without using code, but you need to, this is an object-oriented solution. The way that you need to configure the objects. Like if you have a field, and I will show you that in a form that I created. Well, let me actually do that. Let me go back here. Like if I come here, you see that when I do select anything here, I see then the settings and way to configure this. This is what is called object oriented, right? So this is a no-code solution. But if I want to go beyond what this is doing and do all the things that I know Powerapps by itself is not going to allow me to, then is when I need to use some kind of programming to expand that. And that's actually what I say on my presentation here when I'm actually coming back now. So we're going to go through pricing pretty quick here. So $10 a month, right? This actually Powerapps is included with the E4 because that's what I have. $40 a month, best for businesses, that one license for each user regardless of the numbers of apps that they need to run. This is what I see most of the users are doing because it actually allows the users to create as many solutions they need. And they can also go through the licensing program that they have. Most of them do it this way. On top of that, then you have two types of licenses for the portal version. One is for authenticated users, and the other one is for unauthenticated users. And it is based on the page views and things like that. When we need access, it's easy for us just to say, well, I want to go and just pay monthly, right? But I'm actually working on this project and I need 3 people to have access to do that, then I do it. For an organization, they actually go this way. Let me go back again here, where they actually analyze the agreement that they have with Microsoft, and based on that agreement is where they actually select which pricing and license is going to be best for them. Now, the Powerapps, if I go here, the Powerapps is, as you see, a way to, and you see how easy it is to just build forms. They don't want to call it that way, right? I can actually connect to Sharepoint. I can connect to Microsoft 365, to Dynamics 365, to SQL, and many other sources as well. And again, it is going to be based on establishing the connection and finding where the data is, and then pulling that data or updating the data if it is the case. There are going to be many cases where you don't need to pull any information. You just need to actually build a solution that when something is changed in the form, it actually goes to this location here, either if it is an Excel file or SharePoint list or a database, and update the information there. Now, you can use your mobile devices as well, a tablet or a cell phone, to run the applications and even create some of the applications as well. Of course, we're not going to have the space to do that. With this, I show you that when I create a solution, then you see the 3 options that I have here, which are explained here. Also, the connections that I can create. I show you one example of how I can actually, with Power BI, use an Excel file. Is the same as when I actually do it from the Powerapps solution. To create a solution, you can actually do it from, in this case, a SharePoint list. Let me actually do that. or you can actually go to the portal and create it that way. There are going to be some differences when you do it that way. So let me actually do this, right? So if I am not here, but if I am on my side, this is my side, this is the list, then you see these options here, automate. This is actually something new that I really like that allows users to create like a small flow without actually creating a flow or actually being a developer. You can just say by managing the rule, you can say when this column changes or the value of this column changes, then email this person. Something basic, but there are going to be many cases where you need to do that. Now, why do I need to do that if I can just use the alerts, right? I can come here and say the same. It's just one way to do it. Now, in this case, when I click on integrate, then I see the options for Power Apps, for Power Automate, and for Power BI from here. So meaning that I can create those solutions from here, or I can create the solutions from the portals if I need to. With the exception of the Power BI, which you have the full capability when you use the Power BI desktop. When you use the Power Apps or the Power Automate portal, you have all the functionality that you need to, and you can do whatever you need if you have access to. Like in this case, if I click in here, then I can just customize a form, or I can create a new app, right? Customize a form. If I do that, then it's going to start building the form for me the same way as I can do it if I do it from the portal. Now, there are other ways that I can build this the way that the three forms are not created, and I create my app from scratch because I want that to be laid out in a different way or created in a different way. If I can say that, I can do that. In this case, you see that my solution was built, but only one form was created when doing it this way. You see what happened, right? And no buttons. So this is the case that I need to actually then start coming here, adding the buttons, right? And start configuring this from scratch. Now, this little thing that you see here that I can add, you get frustrated because when you come here, you say, I want to move this around. Well, in those cases, let me see this. Sometimes you see that it is locked. You see that it was locked, unlocked. And that's when you have actually the freedom to then move and navigate this. But in this case, when I created it that way, you see that I don't have any of the options. I can play this, but it's empty because I need to change the settings to display this even when there's no value to it, which it is right here anyway. But I wanted, good that we actually see this because I wanted to show you this. Don't get frustrated when you do it this way. Now, because you need to configure the app from scratch, and you see that only one form was created. Now, if I go back to my Sharepoint site, and I'm going to do Power Apps, create an app, right? And I'm gonna call it test. Now it's gonna start building the app for me. And we're gonna see what happens when we do it this way. And remember that I can do it actually from the portal as well. I'm doing it here from Sharepoint. I will go back to the presentation in a few minutes after we finish with this section here. And then when this is created, now you see that see the difference between the way I created it a minute ago and the way that I'm created it now, right? So you see that 3 forms were created that I can configure, and the buttons, all my buttons are there. The only thing with this is that when you don't have the freedom to actually modify the size of the app. So it is actually limited to only change the restriction, and you can actually change the settings, but you don't have the freedom to say, I want my form to be 800 by 1200. You don't have it when you do it this way. If it is okay for you, then you do it this way and it's fine. it's one of the, I can say, limitations that you have. In this case, I can start configuring this and say I want uh, 2 columns, right? Let me do that and actually do it from here. And the same here. But when I do it this way, and this is just kind of tricky here, it's just giving me a hard time. If I do this, then I will be able to move this over here and then move it over here, and that will do it, right? And then I need to actually, it's just that it is behind this thing here that is giving me a hard time. Now, if I play this, you see that it's not displaying data. It's just because I need to change a setting here where I say it's not going to be a new item. It's not going to be edit. It's going to be new. And that way then it's going to display the form the way that I can enter information. So good that I was able to show you this. Now, again, when you build this, users have access, let's say, to the SharePoint list, to the site and everything, any access they need. But if they don't have access to the solution, they are not going to be able to access this. So when building a solution, make sure that, again, they have access not just to the environment, but also to the solution that you're building. Now, let me go to the next one here. I mentioned to you that there's no code needed, right? But the developers can extend the capabilities when using code and customize it the way that I can say that I'm not a developer anymore. I mean, I still do some development, but not much anyway. But the developers then will use and expand the capabilities that we have in Powerapps the way when they need it, right? For apps, I mentioned to you that you can run apps that you created or that someone else created and share with you. This is what I mentioned to you a few times, that when you create a solution, you need to make sure that it is shared with the users that need access to. For the portal for admins, you go to the admin platform, that Microsoft portal, which I can go here, and I will show you which it is a place between many things where you can actually create the environments. In this case, you have the resources, you have the solutions that you are created, and then you can create your environments. How many environments that I can create? Well, you see the sandbox, you see a trial, production, and a trial, which is to, I believe, test the trial versions that Microsoft have, if you want to do it that way. When I build the solution in a development environment, which is in this way called sandbox, can I build the solution and then move it to my production environment when it's ready? Yes, you can. And we do it all the time. Now, if it is in a small solution, you don't need to do that. You just run it in a production environment directly. If it is a complicated one where you're actually accessing data, updating data, and all of that from databases, definitely you want to use a test environment, not just for Powerapps, but also for SQL and any other source that you are actually working with. Power Automate. This, I'm going to be honest with you, this is one solution. I love most of the Microsoft products, especially if you know how to take advantage of them, right? But automating solutions is one of the topics that I actually discussed during one of my presentations, because I always say that it has a significant benefit to the companies. And I always say this: if you ask a company to give you the opportunity to review all their existing processes, and you compromise yourself the way that you're going to come back to them and show them better ways of manage the existing manual processes that they have, where they are going to be saving time, money, resources. And not just that, it's not about time, money, and all of that. It's also, when you automate a solution, it's also about knowing where the data is, understanding what the status is. I mean, many of the organizations, doesn't matter if it is a small, medium size, or large organizations, they have a lot of manual processes. It's not because they don't have money. It's probably because they don't have time, they don't have the resources, or the people are too busy that don't, or they don't see a value, or the users don't want to that solutions to be automated. They want the solutions to stay the same way because somehow they see they can keep their job. And that's why you see many people still using Excel files that are 30 gigabytes and a lot of macros and connections, and it's functional, yes, but it's not the way to do it. Or you see companies still sending emails, asking people, attaching files, making copies of the same file multiple times, where where you know that we can automate that process, centralize the information so everyone can go to a dashboard and see what is happening. So when I mentioned to you at the beginning that when creating a Power Automate solution, I'm going to go back to my browser here, right? Power Automate solution, yes. Let me do something here, and that's okay. Let me do this, and let me do this, and let me bring that up here one more time. When you create, then you're gonna see in the presentation they keep changing the name. This was not the name a few months ago. They added the cloud word to everything now. But you have the automated solution, which is triggered by an event. What is that? When a file is deleted, when a file is modified, when a file is added, when you get an email, when an email when a message in Teams, when you receive a message in Teams, when your name was mentioned in Teams. It's unbelievable the many templates that they keep creating and adding to it. Some of these, as part of connections, some of the connections require the premium version of it, but the templates are available to everyone. And now, if you see a template here that says notify a team when a new form's response is needed. Well, you're using the template, but that doesn't mean that it's going to create the flow for you. You still need to customize it, but it's actually building the actions and the steps for you, right? And then you just need to configure it, and you actually get an idea that way. They keep adding and adding. There's, I don't know, it was like more than 200 eventually. I don't know how many they have. I don't know if this is actually, this is just the number for this instance anyway. Now that they have 10,000, I don't think they have that many. But this is actually a good thing when using the templates. Now, this is again based on an event. This one, you build the flow and you say, I will start the flow manually. This one is a schedule. You say, I want to build this flow that runs once a day at 10 a.m. in the morning. Why? Because let's say that you have a file that is placed by an application to your OneDrive, right? And then you need that file. I'm just using that as an example. We don't need to do that because you can synchronize OneDrive with Sharepoint, and that way the file will be directly in Sharepoint by the file just being placed in OneDrive. But let's use that as an example. So let's say the file is placed and you get an alert. You build this the way that you know the file is placed at 9:30 a.m. And at 9:35, you want that file to be sent to somebody or to actually be copied to a different place and so on. Then you can build the workflow and schedule it. Different than here that is actually acting based on an event, or this one here that is actually needed to be run manually. The desktop flow, I actually installed that on my computer, which is this one here, right? The desktop. You can actually create a flow now from your desktop as well. It was released recently, right? So you enter the name of the flow. In this case, I'm gonna do this, click on create, and then you build it this way. I have used this in a few occasions. I always, let me move it over, always use the browser here, which I show you in a few minutes. and do it that way. I don't see, to be honest with you, any benefits of using the desktop. I believe some people like it. I'm not sure what it is. In my case, I always use either in this case, like I show you, if I am on my SharePoint site, I'm gonna go back to the SharePoint site where I built this solution. If I actually go to, let me do this. If I'm here, then I just say integrate, Power Automate, and create a flow, right? So if I do that, then you see the same templates that I just showed you. Let's say that I'm going to use the start approval when a new item is added. So I like for you to see this. Then the template is going to be created for me is using the SharePoint connection. That's good, right? Now I select this. This is the account that I'm using. Let me click on continue, and it's showing me all the connections that were added, and then it's building the flow for me. And I mentioned to you that I need to still configure this, right? So it is saying, okay, this is the SharePoint site. Is this the one you want to use? And this is actually the name of the list that you're going to use. Now, when is this going to be executed? When a new item is created. So you see how nice it is that it actually mostly build the flow for me. And then I say, well, to whom is this email being sent to? Well, you can see that it's sending this to, I need to specify that person here, assigner, right? Because this is actually an approval. The approval then, based on the condition, if it is yes, the response that is received here, then it's going to do this, right? And if it is no, it's going to do this. And to whom is sending that email in this case? The person that actually created it, and the same way here. If I need to change this, I can just cancel this and do it. So all of these solutions, I'm gonna be honest with you, are easy to understand if you understand the environment and you know and you follow best practices and you also have a vision and an understanding on how it works for any solution, for Power Automate, for Power Apps, for Power BI, like I showed you at the beginning. If you understand, like if I spend 1 hour with you, like I'm doing it now, and I tell you, you can actually download Power BI for free. Yes. You can then create a connection in Power BI. You need to have access to that source, right? When you create the connection, then you start pulling data, if it is the case. As soon as you're connected and you can see your data, which is what some people that are learning struggle initially, either if it is a database or if it is an Excel file in the OneDrive or an Excel file in SharePoint and so on, then you're fine. As soon as you're connected, then you can take it from there and start playing with the charts that you want to use, how you want to visualize the information and so on. It's the same with the Power Automate and the Power Apps. You see how easy it was when I show you to build an app is. You create the connection. In this case, again, I mentioned to you when you build a Power App solution, you need to make sure users have access to the solution that you are building. In this case, the users don't need to have access to the Power Automate. They need to have access to where this Power Automate is connected to. If it is a SharePoint list, they will need access to that SharePoint list, right? Either if it is modify access or whatever they need, but they don't need access to this. Now, when building solutions, make sure that you're using an account. I always suggest and recommend to use a service account or a system account. An account that you know is not going to expire, the password is not going to change. Well, in this case, the password is not used because they use the authentication that way. But if you're no longer with the company, then the company is gonna be in trouble because all of the flows are not gonna work one day because that account was disabled. So when building a solution, make sure that you use an account that you know in any way is gonna affect any of those applications that you're building in case that account is not active anymore. Now, I mentioned to you that I love automating processes and I strongly believe on that. I mean, every chance that I have the opportunity to do it, even knowing that I mentioned to you, I'm working on migrating terabytes of data from shared drives to Teams and SharePoint. modernizing SharePoint sites, and also implementing retention labels. When I always have the freedom with the last 15 to 20 years to work on any project. I'm honest when I say that. So I'm not focused on one project. I'm always working on many, and I have actually the opportunity to help other people as well. And one chance that I always never say no is when I see the opportunity to automate a process. And that's one of the things that I love the most about, especially Power Automate, because many organizations, doesn't matter how large they are, they do a lot of things manually. And just by sitting with them and listening to what they say about the process and how they do it, you immediately draw yourself in your mind how you can actually design a process that is going to minimize the time, save money, and not just that, centralized information is one of the most critical things in this case, because I have seen many organizations that they struggle to know what the status of the project is, or who has it, or where the files that are associated to this section of the project are, and things like that. If you have all of that in a dashboard in one place where they can see everything in one screen, is when you see and when you start seeing the value of it. Now, for Power Automate, there are different prices that are based on if it is the person buying it, or if it is. This is included with the E365 license that I have, which is the E4, right? But if you want the $15 per user per month, many companies, especially if there are small or medium-sized companies, they don't need many people with access to build the solutions. Right now, one thing that I need to read again, when I did it a while ago, it was something that we were trying to understand. Okay, well, we have 5 users developing the solutions, but we have 3,000 users accessing this solution in one way or another, right? Or let's say 100. Do we need to pay the license for all the users that are not building solutions? They are only accessing the database or the list and updating data where this automate solution is associated to. Do we need to pay a license for those users as well? That's something that I need to clarify, because they keep changing this information. When I checked that a while ago, my understanding was that based on the license that the company had at that time, they didn't need to do that. So you can actually go with the $40 a month. That includes the RPA, the Robotic Process Automation Solutions, and includes as well the AI Builder, 5,000 service credit per month, or the $500, or if it is the case where you want to go at this level, 500 or 150, then you do that. And again, organizations, what I have seen, large organizations don't do it this way, 15, 40, 500. They actually, as I show it to you, when we're talking about the Power Automate and Power Apps pricing models, they use whatever agreement they have with Microsoft as part of the license. And based on the license that they have is where they actually add these capabilities based on the number of users that I will need to use these applications. And every one of these slides, when you get a copy, I'm adding links to the portal here. So you can actually just click on it and see information related to what I'm talking about here. Now, again, Power Automate. So with the desktop, you see it here, and I will show you that. You can record. This is something nice that I tested a while ago, recently, not a while ago. Record the desktop and web actions. The drag and drop designer, 100 of pre-built actions, what I mentioned to you using the templates, you can do that. The mobile version, the Teams version, you can actually access that from Teams, but basically when you just launch the application, you can specify where the data is, if it is in Teams, and if you want to use the template that way, you use it, or if you want to build it from scratch, you do that as well. Remember that Teams has actually a SharePoint site behind. So if you click on your Teams, click on General, which is created by default, and then go to the 3 dots, the ellipsis on top right, you're gonna see Open in SharePoint. It's basically a SharePoint site that you can actually configure like you can configure any SharePoint site with more features and web parts that you can actually add from SharePoint itself. So when you are in a SharePoint site and you're using a modern SharePoint site, and you see all of these new sections that you can add and web parts that you can add to it, in Teams, there are a few more that are available that are not in SharePoint.
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So the type of flows, I mentioned this to you when I show you the portal. I'll go 1 minute through this again. The automated cloud, which is the one that you actually is actually triggered by an event. Something is deleted. I receive an email. I receive a message. My name was mentioned in Teams. Remind me this based on a calendar entry that was added or whatever. The instant cloud flow is the one that you need to trigger manually. In which cases do you need to do that? You will find cases where you know it doesn't need to work based on an event. You just go and execute it when you need it. But you can also schedule that. Create a workflow that runs once a month, once a day at 10 a.m. in the morning, if it is the case. Or you can use the desktop flow solution that I showed you a few minutes ago, or create a business process flow as well. All of these will help you to automate a process. I always say this, and to be honest with you, I don't remember myself saying no to a question or to actually a project opportunity when the business or the somebody is asking about if something is possible or not. There is always a way to do it. If the application, in this case, Power BI, Power Automate, Powerapps cannot do it, then you can actually build other solutions outside and call these solutions from the other solutions that you're building if you need to, right? But there is always a way to do it, unless there are restrictions, you don't have access to it, there are limitations, there is nothing that we can do with that. So any questions since we almost finished? The templates, I show you this, there are many templates. You saw how when I select a template, almost the entire flow is created, right? You're gonna see as part of the connectors that are some are premium connectors that we're not gonna have access if we don't have the proper license. Besides that, we'll have access to most of them because most of them are not premium. And virtual agent, this is something that I really like, and I started working on it recently. And it is creating a bot solution. I mentioned to you that when you're chatting with customer service and you ask questions and they reply back to it and so on, it is actually a solution that was created that is chatting with you. And that's the way that many organizations are going now. Now, a bot solution is not about chatting. A bot solution is about doing things like, okay, this file was placed here. I want to go ahead and log into Azure and move that file to it. And based on another action, the same bot solutions will do something else and so on because it's using Azure. So it is not just about the chatting functionality that I mentioned to you. That is just one of the many things that we can do with it. But any questions you have, let me know. Let me go back to the beginning of the presentation and show you this in case you want to do this and let us know. Any questions?